And I have to tell you, I wouldn't take it for granted if you're fairly new in the room, or even if you've been around this business maybe for a year or two, to have such great leaders that have been around that have so many diamonds that are embracing change as much as I see them doing with this function, with these videos, to be listening and in tuned with what their sons bring into their awareness and their downline diamonds. That's very rare because a lot of people get really set in their ways. And it takes a lot of energy and effort to be open to that. It's mind-boggling how fast things are changing, and we're going to talk about some of that tomorrow during the high-tech, high-touch aspect. But I just really hope you don't take it for granted, because I've seen some big leaders in this industry that do not embrace half the stuff I see this couple and their diamonds doing, so you need to give them a hand. One of the things I've been very impressed with that I want to take back to my organization and talk to some of the leaders about is this youth camp that I've noticed. A lot of people don't do that. They don't provide that opportunity. And again, I know a few speakers already said it, but seeing those young people up here and their confidence and their excitement was pretty amazing. And you'd be very proud to be any of their parents. But I would also say, keep in mind, when you saw how confident and excited they were, a lot of it was because they had team building exercises, they had events, they were on point with what they were doing. And even their video was a great promotional video. But I would just give you this one little bit of twist to it. Just make sure, if you're the parents or some other people in the room that are really building this business, don't let them outperform you with their leadership. Because when they were up here talking, promoting, closing, creating the pool, and watching their video, I get asked a lot, how come my group is energetic and youthful, and why is there so much loyalty or unity? And to be honest, watching that youth camp video, that's what my team looks like. That's actually, that they all look that age, number one, and number two, but that's if you took photos of what we do together, we play together, we do workshops together, we do this types of exercises together, that's what it looks like. And I would just encourage you a lot to, maybe don't just let your children do it, plus you're go-getters in this room. High school and college wasn't the best years of your life. My gosh, 40 is the new 20, but with money and some brains. Yeah? And now you've got connections with the 60 and 70-year-olds who can get you out of jail. It's a big deal, right? Before you were worried that your parents would find out. Now you're hoping they still know who you are because you need to get out. So I'm supposed to tell you my story right now. And, it's real simple. Like I said earlier, I was, 20 when I got in this business. But what happened to me is I was running a small restaurant in the San Juan Islands outside of Seattle, and I was going to college part-time, and I was running my restaurant, going to school, and then I was just trying to get ahead. My parents weren't paying the bills, so I had to do something. I didn't consider myself an entrepreneur as much as I just figured I had to pay for the bills. And I didn't know how to run a business, but a small restaurant came open for sale on this island I lived. I lived on a resort, like the movie Dirty Dancing, if you ever remember that old movie with Patrick Swayze. And there were definitely two types of people if you've ever been around resorts. There's the wealthy people who resort there, like these folks. And then there were the townies who worked there. And I was the townie who worked there. And I'd have these mega yachts that would come into the resort. And it was intimidating because I hadn't been around that type of wealth. I grew up as a hippie on boats. My parents owned charter boats in Florida, and we lived off the grid, outside the matrix. I never went to school. I was trained by my parents, sorta, on the boat. But my brother and I never lived on land until high school. And when I say we didn't live on land, I mean we didn't live on land at all. That we used to get sick if we were on land for more than 48 hours because it didn't move. And it would be called land sick. And some of you might be familiar with it, but it's real. Because everything moved. We were never on it. And so that's how I grew up. I mean, time to us wasn't even measured by watches or calendars or clocks. It was measured by avoiding tornadoes up and down the Florida coast or events. And you'd remember the days of the week more in when the tide went out, or what happened, or that event, or something. It was completely different. Now, of course, at the time, I didn't know any different. My chores were diving underneath the boat and scraping off the bilge and the barnacles. And then as we got a little bit older, and wealthy people would come rent our boats, and it was typically actors or singers or successful business owners, and we would take them out for weeks at a time. My job was just one of the a bilge rat, number one, and then number two, it was to take everybody back and forth in the Boston Whalers and the little boats, and then it was the fishing guide, and I had my six-pack license. I don't know what you call it here, but my ability to take people out on boats before anything else. And so that's how I grew up. And then suddenly, I saw that old movie, what was it? Richmond High. Do you guys remember that? No, Fast Times at Richmond High was Spicoli. And I remember telling my parents, I want to go to school because of that movie. Can you imagine? But for some reason, at that point, my parents decided to leave Florida, and I think it was because at that time, the Miami Vice days, if you remember those TV shows, well, they were real. And it got a little rough living on boats, and pirates really did exist, and they would come out and they would slash your lines at night, and they were very intelligent. They'd just drift your boat out to sea before they tried to board you. And so you'd learn some basic skills of always leaving animals on deck. Not that they'd protect you, but they were an alarm clock because no one could get close to the boat without them going crazy. And so we moved all the way from Florida to Washington, and then I had to take a test to see if I could get into school. And that was high school. So I was a duck out of water. I had no idea. Didn't relate to these kids. Grew up with adults my entire life. And the one thing that sort of got me, I guess, accepted is no one had played football yet, and I was a freshman, and so that's what allowed me to break into some sports and to make some friends, because I felt very awkward. And when and everyone else seems, they had normal lives, families, parents with jobs. None of that made sense to me. And then my parents went through a divorce, and we were in a small town, and we lived at this resort, and that's when this little restaurant came up for sale. And luckily, we'd done really well in football that year, and for a small school, we'd set some records. So I got a small town loan from a small town bank that probably shouldn't have given it to me, but I started this little restaurant, just fast food, and it was nothing fancy. It was at the resort. You had nowhere else to go. I was the place that sold you burgers and beer. I didn't know what I was doing, but I asked around, how do you run a restaurant? And they said, hire cute girls, so I did that. And I had cute girls, and then they said, and the cooks are always a problem. There's always drama. So then I hired a bunch of cooks that smoked pot, and they were all very mellow. So my first business model was pot-smoking cooks with cute girls. I've grown a lot. But I didn't know what I was doing. And I left everybody alone, and the employees thought I was this, great person. But I remember thinking, who am I to start a business? Who would ever work for me? Sometimes we take it for granted if you've never made the jump to an entrepreneur, that it was a huge self-image thing for me at one point. Who would ever work for me? But as soon as I started having people work for me and I owned a business, everyone treated me different. And I couldn't believe it. Suddenly people looked at me like I was an entrepreneur, and they weren't, and they were subservient to me just because of the title. And it just shocked me. And, some of you have broken through those barriers. But then, the cute girls would always keep me in check because I was 19, and I had to get a liquor license because that's where you make most of your money. And I wasn't old enough to drink, so I had to hire a lawyer who was my sponsor in this business. And that's how I'll get to this. So so I had to hire off-duty police officers to come into my restaurant at 8 o'clock at night so they could serve alcohol, and I had to go home. That was the rule to my liquor license. So of course you feel pretty studly when, you have all these cute girls working for you, and you're 19, 20 years old, and they're all 21, 22, 23. But then they'd always embarrass me at night because they'd walk up and go, Mr. Kosegi? And of course, that's pretty cool when they're older than you. I'd go, yes. It's 10 to 8, you need to go home. We're about to serve alcohol. They'd always get me off guard, and I'd be, I'll bring your checks tomorrow, and I'd storm off. Was one day I'd run my restaurant during the summers, and then I'd go to school, and I was just trying to get ahead. And I was working out in the gym one day, and I saw a group of men, probably about 3 or 4 of them, that just looked like they were officer and a gentleman. They were cut above, they were clean cut, they were in good shape, but just something told me that they had something above most other men. Now, if you've ever been a competitor or an athlete, or if you've ever been hunting or understand water or nature, you start to develop a sense for being able to spot good things or bad things. Or for sure, you can walk into a room and pretty much discern very quickly, there's 4 or 5 people I'd want to put on a team if I had to put them on a team. There's 4 or 5 people over there that I really don't care what they say or what they do. They're not a threat. And there's 2 people right there, I hope they're positive because I wouldn't want to mess with them. And some of you understand what I'm talking about because you size people up pretty quickly. Well, I sized up this group of guys, and I made a comment to one of my friends, and I was, hey, I hope when I get to be their age, I don't know what those guys do, but I hope I look as good as them, and I hope that I have some colleagues, some friends like that. And it was just a comment I made as I was lifting weights. And suddenly some cute girl next to me and walked straight over to him. And it was obvious she'd heard what I'd said. And of course, your mind goes to the negative. And I'm thinking, uh-oh, what does she think I said? And she bolts right over to the biggest one and just, and he's looking down because he's a big guy, and he looks like, I don't know, some huge bodybuilder. And he's just looking down, looking over at me, looking down, listening to her, looking over at me. And I'm thinking, oh, here we go. And of course, I'm already justifying in my mind, I don't know what she thinks she heard. I was giving him a compliment. And I'm getting my story ready. And so, and sure enough, he walks right over to me. And he goes, young man, well, okay, because I was 19 and he was in his early 40s. And I just looked up and said, yes, sir. Just came right out of my mouth. Yes, sir. And he goes, did you make a comment about my colleagues and I? And I was getting ready to tell my story, right? Yes, but it wasn't what you thought. And he goes, my girlfriend, is who overheard it. He goes, my girlfriend mentioned you made a comment about my colleagues and I. He goes, young man, what do you do? And I said, well, I have a little restaurant and I go to school. And he goes, well, the reason I'm asking you is this. If you have enough situational awareness to spot us in this room and not know us, now I didn't know what situational awareness meant. Right? I still wasn't sure if I was getting in trouble. Was this a compliment? I didn't know. I was just still looking up at this big square-jawed guy. And he goes, but your assessment was correct. I'm a lawyer. I own the firm next door. And I'm a JAG officer in the Navy. That's the mayor. And this guy over here is on the $1 Million Board of Real Estate. And these 2 people own the banks. He goes, if you really do own a business at your young of an age, and you caught my colleagues and I, that's impressive. He goes, here's my card. If you're looking to do any other business in this state of any kind, we'd like to take you to coffee. We're always open to helping the youth. Because if you're smart enough to catch our attention, we should talk. And I took his card and it said, attorney. And I went, oh yeah, I'm going to need this because I don't know what I'm doing, number 1, with my restaurant. Number 2, I need a liquor license. And I don't know how to get that because they're all smoking pot. So this is like a twofer, right? I'm thinking, okay. And so I take his business card and I run back to my dorm room to all my college friends who, I'm the only one that has a car. I'm the only one that's, I'm pretty much running things like a lot of you did growing up. And yet I go back to my dorm room and there's my friends, if you will. Tweedledee and Tweedledum and Tweedleher. And they're all sitting there just playing games in college in their sweats, and I come bouncing in. Hey guys, you wouldn't believe what happened. Like a lot of you will do after this weekend if you're fairly new. You're going to get so excited and inspired, you're going to want to run home and share the excitement when you first saw this business. And you run home and you're like, guys, you wouldn't believe it. I met this guy. He was at the gym and he thought I was sharp. And he told me, he gave me his card. What do you think my friends said? Well, they were like, good for you, lad. No, they were like, oh, they all played devil's advocate, in between drinking beer. They're like, oh, come on. What would some sharp guy in his 40s want to, talk to you for? You're 20 years old. And I was like, well, I don't know. I mean, I have a business, and I try to explain the story, and they were giving me all kinds of grief for no reason. Now, luckily, maybe it's because I'm short. Maybe it's short man disease. Maybe, I don't know, I had to raise myself. I don't know. But I was listening to him, and then right in the middle of it, I went, you know what? You almost had me. You almost had me doubting. But then my little feistiness kicked in, and I went, listen, you rent from me, you work for me, and you owe me beer. And then I started and I don't know why I was defending this guy. I didn't even know this guy. But the reality was, I wasn't going to let these three people tell me that I didn't see what I saw. I didn't smell what I smelled. I didn't see the fact they were quality people. But I was about to let three people talk me out of what I saw and what I experienced that day at the gym who weren't even there. Think of all the people that get exposed to this business that happens to. Yes? And for some reason, that saved me. That was a defining moment in my life. I don't know how, I don't know why, but I'm very thankful that something told me to tell them to can it. Yeah? And I would encourage you to to help people with this a little bit. So, and then they're like, well, I guess what I realized is, later on, is that they were just playing devil's advocate. Because if I would have gone back and said, hey, you three, and been depressed, I teach this at the workshops. I tease people, I go, don't go home and tell people how awesome it is that you saw something tonight, because they'll try to poke holes in it. Do the opposite, flip it on them, and it's hilarious. Go back and go, hey guys, you're my friends, right? Yeah. Man, I met this guy at the gym. It was all these successful business owners, and they told me, we started talking about business. I asked if I could work with them, and they said, absolutely not. And they made fun of me and tried to explain, and use their experience against me. And it just really hurt my feelings, and they tried to tell me I wasn't good enough. Watch, the same three people will go, I don't know who those guys are, but they don't know you at all. And they would exactly defend. Would they not? Right? So what I've learned is that it has nothing to do with people's opinions, because you can get the response you want. Yes? And I didn't realize it at the time, but that's how I was first shown this. And then I remember going to my first meeting. And that lawyer called me up and he said, well, let's go to coffee. He took me to coffee. He did a QI, gave me a brief idea, told me that some clients of his that were multimillionaires were going to be speaking on success and talking about some mega trends in the country. And if I wanted to attend as his private guest, he could get me in that room, but he couldn't promise me anything. But he said, because, and normally we don't work with people as young as you, but you seem a cut above. If you want, I'll bring you in that room. And he goes, do you have a suit or something to dress up with? And I was like, oh, of course. I didn't have one. I went home and faked it, and I went back to the college. I had to go down the hallway of the college and ask everybody, and we sort of put things together. One person had a tie, one person had a jacket, and we shouldn't have tried because it didn't look good. My biggest fear the whole night was we were going out with these successful business owners to some big meeting, and I was concerned that they were going to go somewhere where I was going to get carded and I had to be 21. I was scared the entire night that there was going to be alcohol and I was going to be asked to leave. In an Amway meeting. It's pretty funny. I had no idea. So that's how I saw the plan, and who he took me to see was now a Crown Ambassador. And all I remember was making people laugh. He was making fun of mean people. He was making fun of people with status, which I loved. And he was empowering the people in the room who just had a dream. And I didn't understand the rest of it. All I remember talking about was, look, you can buy your own products. Don't go to the store. You can eat, and we sell toilet paper. We make money going in and coming out. And he goes, we do it both ways. That's all I remember, was eat and wipe, he said, and have dreams. And I'm not kidding. His whole presentation was that. And he goes, everyone does it, and that's what you're going to do. And then he pointed out people in the room that he was mentoring and leading. And I was just sitting there wide-eyed going like this. I didn't get it. I don't know if I can do what he's doing. I don't even understand it. But if they're going to sell me some sort of kit or program, I don't know if I've got what it takes to do this. But if there was any way at all I could be apprenticed by these people, and I'm not just making this up, this was the thoughts in my head. I'm not the sharpest tool in the shed, but I can tell you this, I'll figure it out. And I had no idea, as most of your leaders in this room, every time they're doing a presentation, all they're thinking is, if any one of you in the audience tonight will honestly work side by side with me and allow me to apprentice you, I have it within my power to drastically alter any of your circumstances. I can help any of you become more of what you want to become. And here I was wondering if they'd help me, and the speaker all night is wondering who in the room's going to let them help you. And we were doing this, and I didn't know it. Yeah? And so, and because I watched late night TV, and I didn't want to have a guru that just sold me some CDs. And I didn't realize they were offering me their hand. They were offering me true mentorship. And so that's how I got started. And then it felt weird coming to a lot of the meetings because I was uncomfortable. I felt like I grew up, I wasn't around all this stuff. And when people dressed and they were nice and they were so positive. But one thing, even though there were some weird things and some things that you could mock or be corny about, but overall in these meetings, if I was new, is there was something right. And I couldn't put my finger on it. But there was something right and there was something special because people were believing in me. And so that's how I got started. And I was 21 years of age at the time, just about to turn 21. From there, I remember at first all I did was I got really good at getting other people in front of my upline and the leaders in the room because I was scared to explain anything. I just wanted you to come see some great people doing some great things, and if you wanted to work with us, great. If you didn't, who cares? And that's how I just started getting folks in front of it. And then I had about 10 people in my group before I did anything. And then finally one of the 18-year-old kids was like, hey, Dean, could you come do a meeting for me? Now, I was 21. He was 18. Sure I can. Because I was intimidated by all the real people, but he was 18. He's a punk compared to me at 21. Because you know how you think, right? So I was like, I can do your meeting. I've seen this now. So I got all ready to go do his meeting. I went to his house. Well, he didn't tell me the meeting was for his parents. It was a 6,000 square foot home where the parents owned one of the largest construction companies and were concerned their kid had gotten into a cult, and they lined up the room. And we're talking ridiculous living room, take off your shoes. When I wasn't used to that kind of nice home. Take off your shoes, walk through this huge carpeted area, and then they had a board and easel set up like this right here, like this kind of big board, and wide open space with 5 to 6 chairs lined up right here in the middle of this huge room. 5 chairs and a board. And they weren't close to me, as if I was on trial. And you know who came to this 18-year-old's meeting that I was going to go talk to all his young kids? I had all kinds of jokes that I thought would be appropriate to motivate 18-year-olds. It was his mom, his dad, the family lawyer, and the family accountant, and the family banker. That's who was there. So, my first meeting. So I go up to the board with the marker, and I just remember someone saying, if you get nervous, just turn around and let them see the backside and just keep drawing circles. Just keep explaining things. So I'm up there talking about PV and BV, and I'm getting totally lost, and I don't quite understand the numbers yet, and I'm starting to dream, and then I don't know what to say because everything I had planned was not appropriate for any of these people. And I was standing there, I was trying to make sense of it, and I couldn't figure it out, and the accountant felt sorry for me. So, out of the 6 jury members, the accountant stood up, walked over to the other side of the board, and was drawing on the board with me to try to help me figure out the math and to explain to the rest of the family what it was I was trying to explain. So he's going like this, and he turns, one thing I do remember is he turns to to the rest of the family, he goes, it seems to me that this business might have an inflationary hedge sort of concept built into it. Correct? Yep. Yep, inflationary. That's what I was looking for. And so he goes and sits down, and I turn back to the board, and then I feel something on my leg. And I'm not quite sure what it is, and I turn around, and it's this big white Samoyed husky, you know, those Alaskan dogs that they'd let in the house, because that's what rich people do. And so this dog walks up next to me and it's rubbing on my leg as I'm trying to draw, and I don't know what to say, so I'm just like, so I try to blow it off, you know, I'm just ignore it, and I'm sitting there drawing, and then suddenly I feel it again. And it's starting to like me. And I'm not kidding. I go like this, and it grabs me and tightens up, and I've got a dog having its way with me in front of them. And so I don't know what to do, because my first meeting, so I'm doing this, finally I'm getting upset. So, you know, I finally give it a little kick, you know, and it sort of, and it goes away. And so I try to recover. Now they're all dying laughing, just like you are, right? No one's helping me. That's not right. They're not feeling sorry for me. No one's interfering with the dog. So finally, I turn back to the board, and I keep going a little bit again, and I'm trying to get over this first meeting, so I don't want to hear about your issues. I'm going back, and then I feel it again. And I'm like, now I'm mad. Okay, this is before reading any books. And I don't care who these people are now, I just want out. So I feel it again, and this time I just give it a hard kick, and I hear, ow. And I turn around, and it's the wife of the house on her knees with a strip of duct tape trying to get the fur off of my leg. I kicked his mother. So, there was some alcohol involved later in the night. It was ridiculous. So, that's how I got started. If you have not done your own workshop yet, you should try it. It's awesome. Okay? But after that experience, I started to grow pretty fast just because I didn't like it when people made fun of me or made me feel like I was weird. But this business made sense once I started to get it. Buy wholesale versus retail. Gee, that's really tough. Work as a clan, don't work as an individual. That wasn't, you know, it doesn't take rocket scientists to figure this thing out. So I started building my group, and I went from 5 to 10 to 20 people. And I remember I had 20 people in my group, and we just pulled them together and did some team building like the youth camp. And we went from 20 to 40 people in 2 weeks. And because we visualized it, we talked about it, and we set a goal. And so we went, all right, you 20, we're turning to 40. And we did. And then, unfortunately, the plan didn't quite work for my group because we were so young, none of us could afford to eat anything. I'm like, oh, well, I guess in my case, I need to run more numbers. Okay, 40 needs to turn to 80 because, you know, we must be like sharing each other's food bars. Come on, guys, order. And that's what we did, and we turned to 80 people. And we were excited about it. And then suddenly, I went into silver qualification. 2 months later, I went into emerald qualification because I was a brand new silver. And I remember Greg Duncan, who's a triple diamond, looked at me and he said, Dean, when are you going to now, you're silver, when are you going to go into emerald qual? And I went, I don't know, next year or something, you know. And he goes, why don't you do it in the next 2 months? And I just went, what? 2 months? He goes, are there 10 people and at least one of your legs? I go, yeah. Well, how long did it take you to go from 10 to 40 people? I said, 3 months. He goes, well, then why don't you help them all do it? I know it's ridiculous looking back, but I had never thought about expecting them to do what I did. So I turned around and went, hey, guys, guess what? You're doing what I just did. And boom, I broke 3 legs right away, making 10 grand a month, you know, and then a little bit more. And I was, you know, excited. And then suddenly I didn't have to have a job. I sold my restaurant because it was taking too much time, and I just suddenly was free. And I didn't know what to call it at the time, but I didn't have to get up. I didn't have to have an alarm clock. I didn't have to drive around in traffic, some basic things. I could buy some clothes. When I first crossed stage, I remember sliding my feet because I had holes in the bottom of my shoes. It was embarrassing to me because I didn't have the money to do it. You know, everyone else in the room that was trying to build a business, I was always surprised. They all had more money than me. They dressed better. They had jobs. I believe the reason I passed them was they were too comfortable. They weren't as hungry as I was. Because to them, this business made sense, but they didn't need it. I needed it. I didn't have any other options. And so I was going to take it. And so, but it shocks me how many people take forever to go full time in this business. And I'd encourage you, draw out your group, counsel with your upline, and figure out how fast you can do it. Because I've been free too long. I can't imagine having to ask somebody else if I could take a weekend off. You know, I can't imagine asking someone, you know, even some people are so controlled at work, they have to ask to go to the bathroom as if they're in elementary school still. I can't imagine being 50 years of age and wondering if I want to go travel, could you take 4 months off to go do it? And so one of the most beautiful things about this business is since I was 22, I've been able to look at my month at a view and plan whatever I want. Like my ability to come talk to you and share with you this week is only because I'm free. Because there's a lot of folks that are too entangled that even if God were to answer some prayers of yours, some of us wouldn't be able to go. And so then when I thought, well, my gosh, I'm flying all the way over here, why don't I go visit all the people I have in India? I've got 20,000 downline there, 30, 40 platinums, a couple of emeralds, never met them. So when I get done speaking here in Australia for a couple of weeks, I'm going to fly over to India. I don't go home until March 10th. And that's if I want to. Because when I finish India, I fly back to Sydney, and I'm going to spend a few days there, and I'm meeting with the head of some film department over here and some business owners that my group has been contacting online because we're going to put some people in the business here in the local area. And a few of them were here this weekend, I've just found out. So yay for my team, because I need to leverage all of you great people. And, you know, because I'm on voicemail and I'm on the computer when I'm in my room talking about these diamonds and what their talks are. And I'm reporting to everybody. My whole group's getting live updates on what you guys are doing. And so I think the coolest thing is if March 10th comes around and I still don't want to go home, I'm not going. I don't have to go back. I'm supposed to speak March 10th at something in San Jose, but if I don't feel like it, I'll just send someone else. Here's what I love. I don't have to worry about being late anymore. You know, unless it's maybe speaking for someone like these folks, but for most of my life, if I'm running behind and I start getting stressed, I literally just call whoever it is and say, hey guys, I'm going to be late. Deal with it. I don't mean to be rude, but I don't have to ever worry about getting pulled over by a police officer because I'm racing to get somewhere. Just some of the real simple things out there. So that's what I did. And some goofy things I did when I first got free, I would just dream up weird things to just remind myself. I remember sometimes I'd stay up all night just because I could. I'd start watching movies at midnight and because I wanted to remind myself that I'm not controlled. I had bought myself back from this country. I had an opportunity to fly with Dexter Yeager and Bill Britt once in a private jet, and I was a brand new Emerald, and I was asking them all these questions, and Bill Britt and Dexter, I think it was maybe Dex, just looked at me at one point, and he goes, young man, you've got some great questions, but right now, all you need to focus on is, have you bought yourself from this country yet? Do you own you? And I had never heard it that way. And I go, well, yeah, I think I'm full-time. I mean, I'm making 10, 15 grand a month. He goes, congratulations, that's step one. Then we can talk further. And I just never thought about it that way. But here's some goofy ones is you guys, you know, cargo pants, right? A lot of people wear it with all the pockets. So here's something my daughter and I do, but I started it back when I was first free at 23, is every once in a while I'd go into the city. where there were all the street bums or the people or the homeless, and because they always ask for change. So I just have these little, jars that fill up with coins around the house, like a lot of us do. Cargo pants. Every little pocket there is with change. And then now my daughter and I do it together, especially when she's like 6 or 7. Now she's 12 now. But what we call it cargo pant day. We'll load it up, both of us, and we'll just walk through the city and wait for the first homeless person to say, "Hey, you got any spare change?" And we're just like, "Ding, you have hit the jackpot, buddy." And you just ought to see them. They're like, it's raining quarters and dimes, and my, so my daughter is all into it, and well, it's just fun. I mean, but it's ridiculous, simple things that we do to remind us that we're free, we're done. And, carpe diem, we love that saying, put it all over the place. But about 24, 25, I was traveling around speaking, doing this stuff. And I don't want to blame anyone else for it, but I started feeling pressured, whether it was from the organization I was in or the church or whatever, but there was an overwhelming sense that I needed to get married as I was moving up the pin levels in this business. And I don't remember anyone ever telling me that, but it just happened. And I think it happens to a lot of young people. And so I remember someone asked me, "Dean, what are you doing this all for if you don't get married?" So, I was just trying to be focused. I was excited to have a dream. But when someone, they asked, "Well, what kind of girl are you looking for?" So at a seminar like this, I told them, "Well, I don't know. I sort of explained what I was maybe looking for. And then 3 days later, they'd set me up on a blind date, and here came this cute little blonde girl to my door. 6 months later, we were married. And, I was so caught up in personal growth, believing, in the process of believing and being positive, that I made the major mistake that a lot of young people do, and some people might even do at the camp, is that because we're like-minded and we have dreams and goals, we'll accidentally sometimes jump to the false conclusion, "Oh, your parents are in the business, my parents are in the business. I've got dreams, you've got dreams. I have faith, you have faith." But we still don't know who we are yet. And I accidentally, and that's not always the case, and so we got married, and there was a lot of pressure on her, because for her, it was explained to me by a pastor, it was almost as if she'd married the local pastor who was on stage. And there were a ton of eyeballs wondering if she could handle it. And she was so focused on proving that she could handle it and getting on stage and speaking with me. 6 months later, we were not only married, she was doing conferences with me. And she proved it, and she did a great job. But I think about the time she proved it, she realized she didn't want this life. She's a small town girl. It's not what she wanted to do. But she was so caught up in proving she was worthy, let alone it. She was 24 at the time. You don't know who you are sometimes at that age. So the reality is, she wanted to leave. But we'd gotten pregnant during that year, and so we had a little baby. And after we had the baby, which is my daughter Tegan, it was horrifying for me. She wanted out, but it's what happened. And of course, I was very resentful and went through a lot of pain. But then I had to ultimately take responsibility and just thought, Dean, I didn't take the test of time. We rushed into it, and I'm sure it was very scary for her too, because to try to back out on something like that in front of all the people that were watching was pretty rough on all of us. But I went through it in the public eye, if that makes any sense. And so it was embarrassing to me. I felt like I had egg on my face. Who was going to listen to me? I was a failure. I had all these people. And I remember walking into the room just thinking, oh no, and were people judging me? But it was a time of personal growth where I had to go back and apply the basics of all basics that I'd been reading in the books. And I had to realize that people have gone through so much pain, it actually made me more relatable, unfortunately, but it did. And, the folks who were judging me probably weren't going to grow anyways. And the folks that were like, well, now you're going to walk with a limp, young man. Welcome to the club. You didn't really think you were going to make it through this alive, did you? Like one of my mentors says, Dean, relax. None of us are making it through this journey alive. Just put a little perspective into it. So if you've gone through any of that, you can recover. I did. And I had to reinvent myself, like I think I heard Lisa talk about and a few other folks. And, and then I had to build this business being a single father. So I homeschooled my daughter. I hired a teacher. I took a couple of my pastor's daughters. It was homeschool, but I didn't do the teaching. I had a real teacher. And we had 4 or 5 kids in the school, and my daughter traveled with me the first 10 years building this business. And I was in Emerald when all this happened. And 12 months later, after I went through my divorce with a 2-year-old, I traveled with my 2-year-old, and I went from Emerald to Diamond in 12 months. But when I went through my divorce, of course, it's financially devastating, emotionally devastating. And I remember I had to take a loan for $2,000 just to get furniture to move out because, I had lost my home in the process. And it took me 12 months to pay that $2,000 back as an Emerald because I'd gone through all kinds of debt and lawyer bills and et cetera, et cetera. But 12 months later, I was able to show I paid off that $2,000 that I'd financed some furniture, and I made $110,000 in 1 month with my diamond bonus. 12 months later. So you can not only recover, you can recover fast. And then for the first 10 years, I continued to build my business, and we went EDC, taking my daughter with me. And so that's what we grew up doing. And this is the first year my daughter now is living with her mother. Her mother's gotten her act straight and is remarried and has had their first little baby. And so my daughter is now going to live with her for a year and be a big sister. So I was blessed to be able to do that for the first decade, and she's been all over the world. Her passport's pretty filled up, right? So I'm not saying I have any answers. I'm just sharing that, okay? Because I would, most of you are extremely successful with your families. All this business has allowed me is the grace to recover, the finances to recover, and enough books to remind myself I'm okay and I can keep moving forward. So that helps it all. I will tell you this. If any of you are going through pain for whatever reason, financial, emotional, marriage, any issues, the intelligent wounded animal will always seek the temporary shelter of the herd. Because if you're a wounded animal and you sneak off into the bushes, you'll either bleed to death or you'll become someone's lunch because the world is tough. And if you're hurting, the worst thing you can do is find yourself bleeding in the dark by yourself. You need to trust the people, the team, and these diamonds and these emeralds. They want the best for you, and if you will give them the chance, they will prove their loyalty to you, and you will build a bond that will last forever. So, let's see here. So my question is, do you know your upline stories? All of these people have defining moments. They've got moments of character that make people cry when they talk with your heart. Have you investigated and asked enough questions to get to know these people so when you're edifying them, you're not just talking about, you got to meet my upline diamond. They retired when they were 12. They're super, super rich. You got to meet them. Well, to a normal person, we don't want to hear that. We don't want to, hey, do you want to go meet someone who's basically outperformed you? That's what new people hear. No, I don't want to hear that at all. I want to slap them, right? So get to know the real things in addition to the income and the pin levels. And if you have to, ask them. Say, could you tell me some things about your wife that no one knows that's a real empowering moment? And ask the wife about her husband because they know. But oftentimes, some of our best decisions are done in the dark when no one's looking. Ask them. Dig into them a little bit. Because that's what will impress people more than ever. You've got some great people. Would you agree from their talks? These people have gone through a lot. And you will realize it's not false edification. Everybody in the room is your superior some way. And if you get to know them enough, you'll find that beauty. The problem with recognizing genius is it often takes a genius to recognize one. And unfortunately in this world, we only seem to recognize geniuses from mathematicians or physics. But the truth is, what about the geniuses with art and music and team building, conflict management, recovering? I promise the people in this room that are platinums and above, and a lot of you in the room, doesn't matter what pin level, you are all geniuses at something. God didn't leave any of you out. You are all somebody superior somehow. So what do I get to do today? I get to travel the world and become a seeker. I look for truth. I look for empowering people. I used to look for winners, and now I look for heroes. I look for people who want to change the world. And I get to meet them like a lot of you this weekend. I love it. I get to laugh and have some fun. Do you see a lot of the videos from the TED convention when they're just talking about have fun? Don't take yourself too serious. I want to break into a building. I've watched Ocean's 11. Right? I got a crew together right now in Canada, and we've done it. I had a billionaire say, he heard one of my CDs where I always talked about, I want to break in a building. He goes, I've got a building downtown. If you want, go ahead and try. I'm like, serious? He's like, yeah. So I put together my crew. Right? I had my little Asian dude who went through the vent. Not kidding. Gymnast. Right? I had the hot girl who was going to distract the guards. Right? I had the guy that could crack different things. We put the whole thing, it was scary. It was really scary. And then one of the IBO's moms, she's 62, and right in the middle of it, she stopped us and she goes, this isn't going to work. She goes, I'll distract the guards. I'm like, how do I say this politely? And she beat me to it. She goes, young man, looks aren't everything. I have treachery. So we let her do it. She got 2 guards completely off, and we all snuck right through the building. Right? And she's like, I've always wanted to do that. Right? Well, like Peter hasn't ever done that in his life. Come on, you hear his stories. All right? So whatever you want to do. I mean, oh, by the way, there's some freaky diets going on here in Australia. There was just some girls, I don't know if I couldn't understand the language or what, but there were some girls today talking about the transparency diet when I went to go have breakfast before I met with Peter. And I was just like, what are they talking about? And they were talking about how, yeah, you can eat pretty much anything. As long as you can see through it, you can eat it. That's the new diet. I guess if you can see through it, you can eat it. Have you heard of this? Because that's what they were talking about. I had no idea. So as I picked up my donut, I thought, hey, you can always figure something out. But taking adventures keeps people's marriage alive, And I've had a great time building this business. I've gotten to know people. I've had all kinds of fun with this thing. I basically took a group of misfits, like the Good News Bears or the Bad News Bears, and I took a bunch of people who shouldn't have, and we did. That was it. Our strength was we should have never been there, but we were. We didn't have to win all the time. We just had to win that time. And we've had a great, fun journey with this thing. And it's almost easier to find misfits who just want to prove we can win at least one day than a bunch of perfect people. Yeah? And so I haven't done anything you can't do. And if you don't believe me, just hang out. I can't spell. I mess up all the time. I almost missed my flight here. I mean, I was so late. I wasn't late. We got stuck in traffic. But I mean, when you're the last person on the plane and everyone's annoyed with you? And so I'm going, and I'm not kidding, down the aisle, and people are really, because they held the plane. And so I finally get in, and they're giving me those looks. I'm like, I totally apologize, and I'm trying to say I'm sorry. And they're like, well, where are you going? I said, I'm flying to Australia. What for? And I decided to be a smart aleck. I'm like, I'm going to do a time management seminar. Because you got to make the best of it. So, some ending comments for you are this. Great line the other day from my pastor. I was joking with my speaker host about it. If you don't keep adventures in your marriage, sometimes we just get in such routines, it gets tough on folks. But the pastor's like, look, I'm in such a routine. He goes, Dean, I'm not like you guys traveling the world. He goes, I have to go home at night because I'm working so much, and if my wife's asleep, I have to put aspirin in her mouth. And so she wakes up going, what are you doing? I don't have a headache. And he goes, that's what I wanted to hear. You got to do what you got to do. So I thought that was a great line. I told him I was going to tell you guys. So ending comments are this. I don't care what you feel you've done or haven't done. If you start speaking with power, I love telling people this. Beholdeth, here comes a dreamer. When you walk into any room, just take that attitude. Beholdeth, here comes a dreamer. When people ask, a lot of times people ask me, well, who are you, Dean? And I joke, I'm like, you really want to know? Because that's a dangerous question. Because to be honest, I think I'm no different. I'm just you if you ever got free. And I said, and if you get around us, it's going to make you look in the mirror. I go, a lot of people only dream with their eyes closed. But when you get around a lot of your emeralds and diamonds in this room, when you dream, when you get around people who dream with their eyes open, don't take it for granted. They're extremely rare. And you can sense it as soon as you're in the room. When you have a dream big enough to include other people, crowds part. People get out of your way. And a hero can hear the faint call of a worthy cause in any arena. And to be honest, a lot of these people in the room, it's not in their nature to ignore it. Even a lot of times you're like, oh no, a worthy cause. Dang it. Because when the whistle blows, the athlete has to get on the field. We can't ignore it. And for some of you, you're wondering if you're going to build this business. It's too late. You wouldn't be here. Now finish this thing. You can't ignore this. A lot of you women in this room are still wondering. You're women of power. You're going to build this. It's time to finish it. And if you don't think so, just learn to quiet the world enough to spend some time with yourself so you can hear that call. Because it gets, the world gets really busy. So I'll end with this. In recent days, this is a line I wrote for a TV show. In recent days, but I wrote it for this business, a seemingly random group of individuals has emerged with what can only be described as special abilities. And they're in the room tonight. Although unaware of it now, these individuals will not only save the world, but they will change it forever. The transformation from the ordinary to the extraordinary is not going to happen overnight. But every story has a beginning. And volume 1 of your epic tale begins tonight for most of you. Do not minimize what's going on here tonight, and it is not an accident you are here. Congratulations.